do you think of European citizens coming to your country to get a job?
I think that's perfectly acceptable. We live in a globalising world. We're more than just national citizens.
If you're good enough to do a job, then you should be let in because you're a benefit to the country.
A crise tem afetado os meus estudos e as minhas previsões, assim como acho que todos os estudantes, no sentido de que a taxa de desemprego jovem com que nós lidamos hoje.
I think it's important to give as many young people as possible the experience of mobility and of an international aspect to their teaching and learning. Much more likely to move as an employee later on if you have been a mobile Erasmus student, and you are far more likely to go to the country where you studied.
When the economic crisis hit Europe, it hit hard. Since several years now, Europe has been in an economic recession with little hope of getting out. Especially the students, mostly from the European South, have felt its effects in their daily life. They have difficulties finding jobs after school or university, and youth unemployment is as high as 50% in Spain and Greece. Although the situation is still critical, there is one positive aspect. While older generations were bound to their home countries of birth during such problematic times, our generation is free to move about. We can flee the crisis and search for new opportunities. Thanks to the EU free movement policy, we can study and work in 28 different countries without even having to worry about a work permission or a visa. However, do students really make use of the idea of fleeing a crisis? Let's go to Portugal, where youth unemployment is at 30%, and see what local students think about fleeing the crisis.
Bem-vindos de volta à cidade de Coimbra, a capital do conhecimento em Portugal. Neste episódio estaremos à conversa com estudantes sobre a crise na Europa. O que a crise que tem sentido na Europa está a afetar nos estudos ou à procura de emprego?
Eu desde os 17 anos, que antes de ir para a faculdade, pelo próprio contexto, nós estamos englobados em Portugal, da crise económica, eu tentei arranjar um part-time de verão e durante o verão tenho essas benesses, consigo ganhar o meu orçamento e estou cá na faculdade por mérito próprio. Mas também sei que há várias famílias que têm dificuldades económicas e para terem cá os filhos é muito complicado.
Bastante. Derivado à falta de emprego, é óbvio que isto é uma roda e vai atingindo a todos. Se há menos poder de compra, há menos vendas, obviamente, e para além de que as despesas são sempre certas.
A crise tem afetado os meus estudos e as minhas previsões, assim como acho que todos os estudantes, no sentido de que a taxa de desemprego jovem com que nós lidamos hoje e também a nível europeu a própria crise nos leva a perguntar se vale a pena nós estarmos a investir na nossa própria educação. No entanto, eu penso que a crise não é só económica e financeira, também é de valores. E, no entanto, eu acho que nessa perspectiva, se nós acreditarmos que conseguimos atingir os nossos objetivos, acho que vale sempre nós termos um curso superior e penso que a Europa irá ultrapassar estas dificuldades.
Já pensaste alguma vez ir à procura de emprego fora de Portugal?
Claro, isso é cada vez uma alternativa mais próxima, porque hoje em dia vê-se cada vez mais licenciados no desemprego e isso tem de estar sempre implícito em nós. Como é óbvio, gosto de estar muito cá em Portugal, mas nunca deixo essa possibilidade fora.
Assim, na minha idade já não é muito viável. Se fosse mais nova, sim. De certeza que apostaria.
É sim, é uma possibilidade, visto que eu tenho um agregado familiar de 6 pessoas e 4 estão imigradas, e é uma perspectiva possível porque a família também tem muito peso nisso e além de que nós, com o grau de mestrado e o rendimento que poderemos ter em Portugal em comparação com outros países da Europa é muito mais pequeno em Portugal, portanto é sempre uma opção ir para fora.
The students in Coimbra seem rather realistic about their future. They know about the hardship of the economic crisis and they are ready to adapt. But they're not the only ones in their country. A recent survey showed that over 50% of young Portuguese are expected to migrate at some point. In Greece, where the situation is even worse, over 70% of graduate students want to work abroad, simply because they can't find employment in their own country. Yet although these surveys tend to produce high numbers on migration, the real numbers are still comparatively low. In many cases, the students stay in their home countries, even though a brighter future might expect them abroad. To find out about this disparity, we meet up with Dr. Melissa Ziegel, head of the migration studies at the United Nations University in Maastricht.
Okay, so actually we see both. It's obviously much more likely that someone who studied abroad will also work abroad. And definitely already being in the country context, understanding that country system, employers there also know that you've been trained in a specific way. So those students are more likely to also work abroad. Many of them are looking anyways to be part of kind of the global elite, and they're willing to work anywhere, and they're up for that. So I think there's a higher likelihood of that. However, it doesn't always happen. And again, a lot of this is because of language. Students often would like to stay and work in a particular country. They would also often, we're in the Netherlands here, so they'd often like to stay and work in the Netherlands. And their English skills will allow them to actually be able to do their job to some extent, but they often also need Dutch to maybe just deal with other colleagues. And so that is where language can often become a barrier to certain jobs also. I would still take it as a very positive thing.
But don't you think this might cause some sort of loss in culture or loss in traditions if really young people move away? And then, of course, they're already much more open than it's.
Well, it depends on how long they stay away, if they keep connections with their origin country. I think it's a big jump to all of a sudden say that they will lose their traditions because they go study abroad somewhere for 4 years. I mean, people still grew up for 18, and those are the most formidable years of their life in their country of origin. So I wouldn't be too concerned about like a loss of tradition. I think many people go back. People still usually keep the traditions that they have. So I would be much less concerned about this kind of loss of history or loss of feeling close to home. Exactly because we're in the European Union and you have all this mobility, which means circularity, which means that you have this possibility to always go back and forth and to mix it all up and to keep those things that you still really feel dear to you while picking up the other side of things too.
As we've heard, there are many different reasons why a student will leave his country. One way or another, it will be a personal decision. While many students stay in their home country, many others take their first chance to leave. Yet, what about the countries which receive the incoming students? Countries such as the United Kingdom, the Netherlands or Germany. With strong economies, stable job markets and good universities, these become attractive spots for students from the European South. Each year, the United Kingdom receives over 130,000 students, which do not only study at the big names such as Oxford, Cambridge or the LSE, but also to study at many of the UK's smaller universities. However, while this is fine under EU law, it still means more competition and less study spots for British students, something that not all British are happy about. Let's go to Birmingham, where our corresponding student TV, Guild TV, met up with some students to talk about their experiences on the increasing influx of European students.
Thanks very much for that introduction, Alex. So we're now standing on the campus at the University of Birmingham, which is home to the tallest freestanding clock tower in the world. Let's go and find some students and ask them their thoughts on European migrants coming to the UK to look for work. So first of all, what do you think of European citizens coming to your country to get a job?
I think that's perfectly acceptable. We live in a globalising world. We're more than just national citizens now. We are citizens of the EU. I think it's fine that European people can come and work here because I'd like to have the opportunity to go to Europe and work myself.
I think that as long as they are skilled workers and will sort of have a get and hold and keep a good job and do something good for the country and pay taxes the same as if anyone else would, I've no problem with that.
Do you see a difference between European citizens and non-European citizens?
Not really, no. Well, I have a different skill set, but they can adapt, I guess.
I think that there's got to be a distinction somewhere, that there can't be like free emigration anywhere, not just in the UK. So I think with EU citizens, they've paid into the system, and that's their political right to do so. Non-EU citizens, I think if they're qualified, a bit like Australia has, I think it's a point system. If you're good enough to do a job, then you should be let in because you're a benefit to the country.
If the market was to collapse here or for other reasons, would you move to another country for a job?
I think it would just depend on my personal circumstances. I mean, very few people who move for economic reasons tend to necessarily want to move, and especially if they have their roots in their family. So I think that you can't necessarily say what will or what won't facilitate people moving.
Yeah, definitely. I'd probably first go to France, so I went down my year abroad and I loved it there, or anywhere, as long as there's a job.
So we've heard some really interesting insights into different issues that affect Europe. That's all from us now. I've been Claire Lynch reporting for Guild TV.
Although the students in Birmingham have mixed attitudes towards the migrant students, the British don't seem to mind to study alongside foreign students. They have noticed the benefits of the free movement of the European Union to its citizens, and they're glad to fulfill their part. The EU, being the main enabler of student migration, has seemed rather passive in the last years. While we all know the Erasmus programme, there is a lot more that the EU offers to young Europeans who want to migrate. To find out what exactly it is that the EU offers, and to find out about their future plans, we will now interview Adam Tyson, who works for the European Commission.
We were wondering if the EU has certain policies towards improving, let's say, labour migration within the European Union.
Well, I mean, at the moment, it's a relatively small proportion of the labour force in the European Union who move from one country to another to work. We're talking about just over 3%. Much more likely to move as an employee later on if you have been a mobile Erasmus student, and you are far more likely to go to the country where you studied. And this is a very good thing because it means that the economy works better. We get better results, better growth, creation of more jobs as a result of that. So if you look, for example, at the Nordic countries, you will see that if you look just at the researcher population, you will see that around 1/3 of all of the researchers in the country are from elsewhere in Europe. What we are trying to promote also is much more multilingualism by encouraging the national authorities in different countries to introduce language learning in schools at a much earlier age.
Do you think then within 20 years the students will be less domestic but much more European?
I think they will. I think we're already seeing that. We're already seeing a broader range of thinking. And I think it's important to give as many young people as possible the experience of mobility and of an international aspect to their teaching and learning, which is why the new Erasmus Plus programme focuses not only on universities and universities of applied science, but also on vocational training colleges and cooperation between schools. So we need to get more international experience into the curriculum for vocational trainees and for primary and secondary school pupils. And that's why we are supporting partnerships between schools and between vocational training colleges so that there can be a joint experience. So that is why where the European Union can really add value by making it as easy as possible for these sorts of exchanges to take place.
Student migration has become a reality in Europe. Every year, several hundred of thousands of students move from one European country to another. It may be for a semester abroad, others for a lifetime. Some because they want to, others because they need to. But no matter for what reason and for what time period, student migration enriches Europe. On a personal level, it connects people from Europe. It bonds our generation, it fosters peace, and it helps to understand our European co-citizens. On an economic level, it helps Europe to grow. It gives people opportunities and a future which had neither in their home country. And it creates a generation which is able to live in different countries and speak different languages. Thank you very much. My name is Alexander Medjed. This has been Campus Europe, and see you next time.